Welcome to Bible for Modern Minds podcast.
Today we are really cutting through the noise to look at a pretty extraordinary personal testimony. The sources we've got stacked up detail the life of a man named Jordan, and they chart his entire passage.
Right. From this place of just, profound generational trauma.
And deep addiction.
All the way to a radical spiritual transformation. And he gets into what he calls Deliverance Ministry.
This is a powerful, deeply chronological account.
Yeah, and we should probably stress right at the start that this isn't just a story about, overcoming addiction.
Not at all.
It's an immersion into a very specific Christian framework where Jordan uses this term bondage.
Right.
And it doesn't just mean bad habits. For him, it describes these spiritual strongholds rooted in deep trauma, family history, and what he really sees as demonic influence.
Exactly. So our mission here is to trace this journey precisely. We want to map out the foundational impact of his early trauma, follow that escalation into severe addiction, and then try to understand these dramatic, sometimes terrifying, supernatural encounters that forced a total life change.
And crucially, we have to look at the framework he uses now to maintain that freedom. The thing he calls deliverance.
Yeah.
It's just vital to grasp that his initial trajectory in life was set by just extreme instability.
A war zone, really.
Yeah, the narrative paints a picture of a childhood just defined by chaos and, early exposure to some really serious illicit activity. He was hyper-vulnerable from the very beginning.
And when you start pulling back that curtain on his childhood, the roots of all the later chaos are completely exposed.
Yeah.
Jordan's mother, she struggled significantly with drug addiction. She was in a deeply abusive relationship with his father, who was a drug dealer.
And his father was not just involved, he was heavily involved. He ends up serving 13 years in jail. And the source really emphasizes that this created this deep, painful feeling of abandonment for Jordan, something he says he struggled with from his earliest memories. That lack of a foundation was a massive wound.
There's this one specific detail that just powerfully illustrates the toxicity, the callousness of his home life.
Yeah.
He recalls his father while his mother was literally in labor with his sibling.
Oh, wow.
Putting her out of the car and telling her to just let her mother raise the baby.
That level of rejection delivered at the most vulnerable moment physically. It just sets the psychological stage for all the self-worth issues that are going to come later.
And that instability, that lack of any consistent male figures, it directly feeds into this severe identity confusion.
Which is then compounded by early sexual trauma. This is where the narrative gets significantly darker.
The source states that molestation began before he was even 10 years old. It was by a relative, and it just continued intermittently.
And the details he gives are they're heartbreaking. They illustrate a total devaluation of the self.
He describes being forced into sexual activity for something as basic as a bowl of noodles.
That single transaction, your dignity for a bowl of food, it's a devastating detail.
It is.
It just shows how the foundation of trust and personal value was just completely destroyed almost immediately. And the source material argues this is what paves the way for what he later calls sexual bondage.
And what's so fascinating here is the internal conflict this created, because despite all the chaos, he grew up with a very godly grandmother.
A prayer warrior, he calls her.
Exactly, in this Pentecostal, charismatic church environment. But he describes himself as completely non-religious.
Right. His definition of success, it wasn't from the church. It was modeled on his father's street life.
Money, houses, cars.
Exactly. So you have this backdrop of powerful faith, but his reality, his aspiration, it was all defined by crime and wealth.
And this clash created a completely hidden lifestyle. His upbringing, despite the reality of the drug dealing, was conservative in its beliefs. Homosexuality was the sin you should never do.
So he had to hide his curiosity, his engagement with the gay lifestyle.
Well, he's also dating girls from about age 13.
He's just trying to reconcile these two worlds that, in his mind, were completely mutually exclusive. And that internal dissonance, it didn't just cause stress, it directly fueled the explosion in his teenage years.
Oh, it absolutely erupted as a teenager. Total chaos, escalating substance abuse, and this deeply embedded feeling of sexual bondage.
And, it's worth noting that constant internal conflict, Jordan was diagnosed with ADHD, struggled intensely at school, was seen as out of control.
He was heavily medicated.
Right. But he also says he was a smart magnet student, which just highlights this intelligent mind that was simply incapable of managing his chaotic inner life.
Which leads to self-sabotage.
Every time. And his coping mechanism was just pure excess.
Started drinking and partying young, and he details getting up to like 22 shots deep at a time.
Smoked massive amounts of marijuana, used lean, the codeine cough syrup mix.
And the sexual component, it just escalated right alongside the drugs. He describes his desire for men getting so strong that he felt it was just inevitable he'd give into it completely.
So he's maintaining this secret bisexual life. He's often paying for sexual encounters with men specifically to avoid any kind of emotional attachment,
While at the same time sleeping with girls.
which resulted in him contracting venereal diseases, in his words, all the time.
It's such a vivid picture of a self-destructive cycle, using sex and money to manage intimacy, which leads to guilt, shame, and these recurring physical consequences.
Absolutely. And the cycle was fueled by seeking these temporary fixes. But then the narrative takes this really interesting and frankly terrifying spiritual turn.
With the introduction of K2 synthetic marijuana,
Yeah.
he started using it initially because he got a job at a bank type place. They had random drug tests.
And K2 was a loophole he could pass.
But the reason he got addicted was completely different.
This is where it gets really strange. K2 became the perfect storm for him. Jordan was always interested in the supernatural. He watched shows like Charmed and Harry Potter. He became addicted to K2 because it gave him, and this is his description, a supernatural experience.
He felt he could genuinely interact with the supernatural world. He describes these intense hallucinations, bizarre experiences.
But the drug wasn't just a high. It was a dark chemical key to the spiritual realm he was already fascinated by.
And this leads directly to the moment his life just completely shattered.
He'd reached his lowest point, his nadir. He lost his job. He was in a toxic, open relationship.
Became so depressed he was having active suicidal thoughts.
And this desperation, this fear of the end, it finally prompted him to cry out to God.
And that cry was met with the ultimate terrifying spiritual encounter, and it involved K2. He details smoking a specific blend that was marked with a red devil image.
Oh, wow.
And this led to a visceral near-death experience. The atmosphere in the house felt, he said, like hell. He felt this palpable, dark presence.
And then?
Then he heard the audible voice of God, telling him that he was disappointed, but that Jordan was called to preach the gospel around the world.
The specific and undeniable nature of that voice, coupled with that profound fear of death, that was the spiritual hard reset.
It just broke through everything. Years of self-medication, addiction, denial, nothing else had worked.
And his initial response to that divine call, it was incredibly unstable. He tried to follow it, but he was still clinging to his old life.
That instability is key, right? He had all these external confirmations that seemed so random.
Like the prophecy from a Baptist barber college instructor. And Jordan's dressed, like a thug sagging pants, gold teeth. And the guy tells him he's going to be a preacher.
Then he's driving and the radio station just changes by itself.
To a preacher delivering a prophecy about running from God. The Jonah story.
The fear must have been immense. He immediately enrolls in Bible college.
But because of his history of dropping out, which was tied to his ADHD and lack of self-control, nobody believed him.
His mother, his girlfriend, they all dismissed it, said he was playing with God.
He had no support. So he dropped out, went right back to his old habits, and just believed the prophecy was too hard.
The real structural turning point, though, came when he moved in with his sick grandmother to care for her. And this is what put him in the path of Miss Lily, her nurse.
Miss Lily was this profoundly influential figure, a wonderful woman of God, he says.
And Jordan was still actively getting high, sleeping around, but Miss Lily never condemned him.
Right. He described seeing her non-judgmental love, her joy. He said she never preached at him, but just her presence was convicting. He felt she knew Jesus without her even saying a word about it.
And she recognized that calling on his life. She prophesied again that he would be a preacher one day.
So it was the relationship, not religion, that finally got through to him.
And her influence sealed his commitment. She gave him the book and video, A Descent into Death by Howard Storm.
The atheist who claimed to have visited hell.
Jordan says this just shook him to his core. It forced the decision he'd been avoiding.
He describes making this radical black and white commitment. If I'm going to be a Christian, I'm going to be a Christian on fire or not at all.
And that led to a complete overnight repentance. He threw out everything, drugs, porn, all of it.
And entered this period of intense religious dedication. Constant fasting, lost 30 pounds, just reading the Bible nonstop.
He had found that initial conversion, but the journey was not over.
Not even close. 5 years into this new life of faith, a traumatic event, his father's death, it caused him to spiral.
He relapsed back into old lustful habits for a full year.
And this relapse forced him to recognize a critical distinction in his theology, the difference between getting saved, that initial conversion.
And what he calls full deliverance.
So if conversion saves the spirit, what is deliverance actually addressing?
According to the sources, Jordan explains it like this. Conversion is instantaneous for the spirit, but the soul, your mind, will, emotions, that might still need a deep cleansing.
From trauma, from residual demonic influence, and for generational curses.
Right. He specifically cited his father's history as a womanizer as a generational issue that resurfaced in his own life.
Which raises such a powerful point. Even while he was deeply committed to ministry, he's praying 5 or 6 hours a day, he's preaching.
He's still plagued by lustful desires, sexual dreams, sleep paralysis.
And the pastor he consulted just told him to focus on Jesus. But he felt like he was already doing everything he possibly could.
It really highlights the central struggle in his testimony. You can be intellectually and spiritually committed, even be in ministry, and still be bound by these deep wounds and patterns from your past.
The old solutions didn't work. They were treating the fruit, not the root of the problem.
So what's fascinating is how he defines the ongoing fight. He had to learn about spiritual open doors, about engaging in specific spiritual warfare to get free.
Which he found through both receiving and learning what he calls self-deliverance ministry.
And the outcome, he emphasizes, was radical. This deliverance, he says, broke the curse he perceived. The desire for homosexuality just left him completely.
But the key message, and this is so important, is that this victory requires constant effort.
It's not a one-and-done thing?
Not at all. He recognizes that what he calls the old Adamic nature, the sin nature, it's still there. It's still capable of causing a relapse.
And that's the ultimate framework for maintenance. He warns that if you cleanse the spiritual house, but you leave it empty,
The past will come back, 7 times worse.
so the house has to be constantly filled with the Holy Spirit, with the presence of God. Freedom isn't passive. It's a full-time, active management job.
So what does this entire intense journey really synthesize into for you, the listener? Jordan's philosophy boils it all down.
Relationship is greater than religion.
Exactly. Jesus must become, in his words, more valuable to you than your sin.
He encourages the complete surrender of all binding habits, pornography, witchcraft materials, drugs like weed or K2.
Because having experienced both, he confirms that the presence of Jesus is just better than any drug. It leaves a pleasant taste and lasting peace.
Compared to the horrific after effects of sin.
We've just traced this incredible, turbulent journey from a legacy of abandonment and addiction through these radical supernatural encounters,
Both dark and divine.
to finding a persistent freedom by engaging in this ongoing spiritual warfare against his past.
The source material posits a powerful, unwavering hope for anyone who might be struggling right now in deep bondage, depression, or chronic anxiety.
Yeah, Jordan's story presents this idea that victory isn't just guaranteed by an initial belief. It has to be actively exercised, fought for, every single day.
Through deep, intimate relationship and a willingness to surrender everything. So if true freedom is defined, as Jordan defines it, by making Jesus more valuable than one's deepest desires, even if that means being willing to give up sex forever, what is the most valuable thing in your life right now?
And what profound all-or-nothing demand does that relationship place upon you?
That's our thought for you to chew on today.